I once encountered a case involving a young woman who started dating a guy, and eventually, they moved in together. Then, one day, the man simply disappeared from the apartment. He hadn't gone out, yet he was nowhere to be found. The apartment emitted a strange odor. And the woman was gone too. It wasn't until the landlord came to collect the rent that something seemed off. The landlord's profession was rather unusual. He worked at a funeral home, specializing in preparing corpses to look presentable for their final viewing. Renting a place like this certainly required courage. The young woman was indeed brave. She lived there normally until one night, when something very bizarre happened in her apartment. The case began when the landlord rushed to report it. At the time, he came to our precinct, looking anxious. He was a man in his 40s, tall and thin, with a round, chubby face that gave him an almost cartoonish appearance. He explained that the lock on the apartment he rented out had been changed, and as the landlord, he couldn't enter. I found it odd. Isn't this normal? And why would a landlord need to enter a tenant's apartment anyway? But the man went on, saying that the apartment was empty, no tenant inside, but he still couldn't get in. I was puzzled. Do you mean the tenant left without returning the keys? I asked. I never saw the tenant. The man replied, I rented this apartment to a young woman. She always paid rent on time, but starting last month, she stopped responding to me. I visited the apartment a few times, but the door was always locked. I couldn't reach her by phone or social media. After waiting 2 weeks, I realized something was wrong. I even asked the neighbors. They said no one had come or gone for a long time. Then why didn't you just break the lock? Why come to the precinct? I asked. There's a smell inside, he said, sniffing the air nervously. I'm a bit scared. I became alert. What kind of smell? A foul odor, he said. It smells like rotting meat. I understood, but it struck me as odd. How could this man be so sensitive? Most people, encountering a strange smell, would first call a locksmith to check the place. The smell could come from spoiled food, a defrosted refrigerator, or even unwashed clothes. But this man went straight to the police. That's not normal. Detecting rotting flesh and immediately reporting it. Highly suspicious. I stood up and asked, what exactly do you do for a living? At a funeral home, he replied in a low, careful voice, glancing around nervously. You get it, right? Ah, that makes sense, I said immediately. Let's go to the scene. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, at the corner of a long, narrow building, somewhat isolated. I looked at the hallway. The apartment's location was odd, wedged into a sharp corner of the building. The layout was irregular. I glanced at the landlord. He looked embarrassed. The pay at a funeral home probably wasn't great. On the way up in the elevator, I asked him about his job. He explained that he worked in corpse preparation, essentially doing makeup on deceased people to make them look natural. I knew the work was tough and socially stigmatized, so I felt some respect and spoke more quietly. As soon as we approached the apartment, I knew he wasn't exaggerating. There was indeed a faint, unpleasant smell, a rotting flesh odor. I've been to many scenes, and I recognized it immediately. Was it human? I couldn't say. Opening the door was easy. The lock was simple, and I had the tools to pry it open quickly. Inside, we were surprised. The apartment was clean. The living room was tiny, only about 100 square feet, but everything was neatly arranged. The floor had a thin layer of dust, suggesting someone had cleaned thoroughly before leaving. I checked behind the TV. My fingers touched only a thin film of dust. The tabletop was the same. This tenant was meticulous. I remembered the landlord saying the tenant was female. This renter is a woman, I asked. He shrugged, still sniffing the air. A young woman in her 20s, works as a graphic designer. I pointed toward the kitchen. Stop sniffing. It's over there. We walked a few steps and entered the kitchen, and I had to step back immediately. The smell hit like a blast of gas, making my head spin and leaving me disoriented. The landlord was okay, just covering his mouth, waving his hands frantically. The odor came from the refrigerator. I slowly opened the fridge, pushing the door aside. The power was out. Inside it was pitch black. As I leaned in, my face turned pale. A hand had been stuffed into the lower compartment of the fridge. Fingers splayed. The bones were exposed, the sharp ends resembling a massive exclamation mark. The landlord screamed and ran out into the living room. Gasping, I covered half my face with my shirt and took a closer look. There wasn't just one hand, there were many pieces, too dark to distinguish clearly. I couldn't even grab my phone for light, so I retreated to the living room. I closed the door and called for forensic technicians. I turned to the landlord. "You're not going anywhere. Wait here." "I know." He coughed, sounding like he had a sock in his throat. "I'll cooperate." Looks like the body was initially frozen, then the power went out. That's why the smell spread, otherwise, you wouldn't have noticed. But I have to say, your nose is impressive, 2 doors away, and you could still smell it. "I've seen a lot of corpses," he said grimly. I didn't want to, but I'm familiar with the smell. The pieces were worse than I expected. I watched him closely, and he squirmed. "Why are you staring at me? What exactly do you do at the funeral home?" I asked, lighting a cigarette. "I do post-mortem cosmetics," he said. "After death, faces deform a bit. I put on makeup, add some powder, make them look lifelike, so the family doesn't faint at the sight." "You've seen a lot of dead people, huh?" I asked. "More than the living," he said, chuckling. "Honestly, more dead than alive. So that's how you knew there was a corpse inside?" I asked. "Pretty much," he admitted. "After seeing so many dead bodies, I just have a feeling something's off. And I followed that instinct here." The forensic pathologist, Officer Daniels, arrived. He looked at the scene and laughed. "Another dead body?" Daniels had trained at the police academy with me, so we were informal with each other. I told him, "There's a hand in the fridge." He went in with an assistant. Soon, the assistant came out and waved me in. Daniels was removing 2 hands, 2 feet, and 2 arms from the fridge. I guessed there might be more. When he pulled out a bloodied head, I had to step out. Too gruesome. After a long while, Daniels emerged. The landlord had been taken away. I stood outside smoking, the smoke slightly masking the stench. "All the limbs are here, except the torso," Daniels said casually, fingers intact. "The torso is gone." "Professional, as always," I said. "Was it a male victim? Cause of death?" "Male, other details. The autopsy will tell," Daniels said, lighting a cigarette. "Looks like stabbing. The hands alone show 30 to 40 wounds." I was shocked. Could a young woman really be capable of this? I pictured her smiling face. "The landlord works at a funeral home," I said. "Interesting, right?" "You suspect him?" Daniels asked. "I have my doubts, but he reported it himself. That's unusual," I replied. "Usually, the first suspect in a homicide is the person who reports it. Many perpetrators try to act as concerned citizens, thinking it will clear suspicion, but it usually backfires." We verified the landlord's story. It matched the evidence. Everything checked out, with alibis confirmed. I focused on the tenant. How long had she rented the apartment? I asked. "Not long, less than a year," he said, still smiling. Not a hint of irritation, surprisingly calm. "Did anything unusual happen when you met her?" I asked. "No," he said. "She asked my profession." I told her honestly. Though the agency had already informed her, most people avoid me, but she didn't care. She signed the lease immediately. "That made me happy," he said. "This cheap apartment was hard to rent. No one would take it, even at a 30% discount." "You seem like a good person," I said, "working at a funeral home every day, seeing death, and maintaining this mindset. It's not easy." He leaned forward. "Dead people are more sincere than the living. The scary part is the living." After completing the report, he went to rest by the window, like a fish gasping for air. "Why so worried?" I asked. Then I remembered something. He frowned. "If the tenant is the killer, my apartment is cursed. No one will rent it again, not even me." I asked if her contact info was recorded. "Yes," he confirmed. "Phone numbers, WeChat, the signed lease. Check her out. She seems normal, attractive." Identity confirmed quickly. A regular young woman, working in a small company. The victim was a man in his 20s. Daniel's autopsy showed a fatal neck wound and numerous random stab wounds on limbs, suggesting rage-driven violence. No one reported him missing, so ID was slow. Fingerprints were collected but unverified. We had to track the young woman, surprisingly. She hadn't hidden. She bought a train ticket under her ID and traveled south. Within days, local police found her at a famous tourist site. She was calm at capture, even saying, finally, during interrogation, she admitted to stabbing him while he slept. She left the knife in the cabinet and cleaned up before leaving. Consistent with the scene. The torso? I asked. I threw it in the river, she said. Packed it in a suitcase at night. Why not take the rest? I asked. No need. The fridge couldn't fit it, otherwise, I would have taken everything. What was your relationship? I asked. Ex-boyfriend, I guess, she said, faintly melancholic. Why kill him? Because if I didn't, he would have killed me, she said. She told the story of college, dating, his obsessive behavior, and how she eventually moved out after being controlled and stalked. She detailed years of manipulation, abuse, and finally, her carefully executed act of self-preservation. Her methodical cleanup, attention to detail, and psychological state were all consistent with the scene and evidence. Fingerprints on the knife matched both her and the victim. Her confession confirmed everything. This case illustrates a harsh truth. Love requires mutual respect and independence. No one should diminish themselves for the sake of affection. A few warnings for those seeking relationships. 1. Avoid partners obsessed with phones and social media. 2. Avoid those who overly prioritize you while demeaning themselves. 3. Avoid excessive codependence. 4. Avoid evaluating love based on willingness to engage sexually. Finally, always secure your rented apartment with a strong lock.